Hello, everybody. In this video, we're going to be learning as much as we possibly can about Elden Ring Night Reign. Before we jump into the interviews, the articles, and taking a look at hands-on first impressions, let me give you a TLDR on what the hell this game is, because I know it's pretty confusing. Elden Ring Night Reign is a 3-player co-op roguelike set in the Elden Ring sandbox. The goal is to survive for 3 in-game days where you spend about 15 minutes exploring an alternate version of Limgrave in the day, looting, killing mobs, trying to piece together an on-the-fly build as a circle similar to one you would see in BRs gradually closes on you and your team. Night will come and a big boss will spawn, and these are things that you have seen from other games. We've had examples of it being Margit, the Tree Sentinel, and of course from the trailer, we've also seen that there's other Dark Souls bosses in here, not just Elden Ring bosses. You then have to kill this boss to go on to the next day, and then you rinse and repeat until you get to the third day, the big super bad boss, and that is what you would consider a successful run if you kill that boss. There will be 8 playable characters on launch with their own look, stories, skills, etc., and you can progress these characters like you would in other roguelikes, slowly unlocking more and more things to help you be successful, with, of course, completing successful runs being the way to get the best stuff for your characters. Now, before you guys say anything, this is not a PvP game, it's PvE only. There's no invasions. There is not a live service component to this game at all. They're very specific about this being a $40 out of the box full experience. You will not be paying for a battle pass, nothing. Everything you unlock for your characters, whether it's skins, whether it's skills, whether it's whatever, is all just in the game and you get it through gameplay. Now that we know generally what it is, let's jump into PC Gamer's hands-on impressions to get some of the finer details about what we can expect from this game based on someone's actual experience playing it.
So I'm going to give you a first look at Night Reign, how it plays, what about it is exciting, and what about it wasn't fully convincing right out of the gate.
Yeah, it's worth noting the network test, so you can't sign up yet, but January 10th, you'll be able to sign up for the network test, and it's happening sometime in February. Hopefully the beginning of February. Or the middle of, no, not the middle. The middle would be the beginning of February.
Let's break down the key details. 1. Elden Ring Night Reign is a 3-player co-op roguelike.
Yes.
In Night Reign, you play as a member of a 3-player co-op team exploring a familiar but different version of Limgrave, Elden Ring's starting zone. The map has a static overall layout, but with sort of like a DJ mix approach to the weapons you find and the enemies you encounter. They're going to be random and jumbled up every game. Before each run, you'll choose a final boss to go after, almost like you're picking a creature to hunt in Monster Hunter. But before you fight them, you have to survive 2 days of exploration and combat, with each day ending in a big boss fight of its own. So in the build of the game I played, the first night I would either end up fighting a pair of demi-humans or a big centipede monster, while night 2 was either Margit the Fell Omen, all of you are very familiar with him if you played Elden Ring, or a Tree Sentinel with a couple of lesser riders, but still very scary knights riding alongside him. So as an Elden Ring, you can be matched with random players for the multiplayer.
Interesting. Okay. There will be matchmaking, yes, because it is a co-op game. This is a co-op game. It's not like a single player game that you can kind of maybe play with other people. This is a co-op game that maybe if you're crazy, you play by yourself. So we're going to try playing it by ourselves too. But yeah, there's not going to be like a ton of communication stuff. There's not going to be any voice chat or text chat. You're going to be interacting with each other through like gestures and stuff. So even if you are like someone who doesn't like to play co-op or you don't want to play with other people, it shouldn't be really problematic at all or that invasive of an experience for you to play this by yourself and matchmake with other people.
You can use a multiplayer password system to party up with your friends. 2. Night Reign will be a premium-priced, not free-to-play game. Fromsoftware told me they don't consider Night Reign to be live service. They want a full game experience in the box, so to speak, and that means updates after launch are still an open question. Bandai Namco, who is the publisher, did confirm for me that you won't need to own Elden Ring to play it. Night Reign is totally standalone, and the price will be comparable to Shadow of the Erdtree, this year's expansion, which probably means $40, but that's not confirmed. Basically, the
I would assume it's $40, a high end $50, but I would guess that it's going to be $40. Yeah, I would guess 40.
Takeaway is this is not a full $60 or $70 priced game. 3, you'll play as predefined characters. So yeah, there's no character creator in Night Reign. Unlike basically all of FromSoftware's RPGs, Night Reign does not let you create a custom character, though you will unlock alternate skins for the cast of 8 preset characters as you progress through the game. Night Reign is going for the hero route with predefined characters. I get to play with 4 of them, but there will be 8 total in the final game. So in the build that I played, there was Wilder, who is an armored knight who resembles kind of like the canonical box art character from a lot of the Souls games. He's got a hefty longsword and a really cool high mobility grappling hook. There's also Duchess, who's a speedy
grappling hook, which I assume plays like Sekiro grappling hook, because you will also see in the trailer, there was definitely Sekiro like movement too, and we'll take a look at the trailer as well. But yeah, that character is John Soulsboard, indeed. Yep.
And a really cool high mobility grappling hook. There's also Duchess, who's a speedy kind of scout-like character in Nier Automata cosplay, equipped with a magic dagger. Duchess dodges with an elegant sidestep rather than the usual roll, and an incredibly powerful ability that lets her re-deal the last few seconds of damage that both you and your allies have done to a nearby enemy all over again. It's really, really effective with team coordination and really satisfying to pull.
That sounds insane. So I'm going to assume that these bosses are going to be even more ridiculous than they are just in the games that they're coming from. If there's a skill where you can just do all the damage that was just done to your team to them, that's going to be a lot. That's a lot of damage. 3 times like their mega duper move on them.
Pull off. There's also Guardian, who's kind of like a Birdman. He was the tankiest of the characters that I played as, whose ultimate ability has him fly up into the air before performing this huge dive bomb attack back to the ground, which deals damage in a wide area and boosts your allies' defense for a little bit. This is a really clutch move. You can use it to both deal damage and revive your allies at the same time. A funny quirk of Night Reign is that you actually revive your allies by attacking them rather than holding like a revive button the way a lot of games do it. And the 4th character that I got to play as was the Recluse, who's a very frail mage, the most complex character of the bunch, who I spent the least amount of time with as a result, because I didn't want to constantly be dying while I was playing. But I think doubtless will be very powerful in the hands of skilled players once people have a lot of time to actually tuck into Night Reign.
Interesting.
So the Recluse has the ability to absorb elements from enemies, which sounds a little confusing, but it's based on kind of the last thing that's hit them, what elemental affinity that attack might have, whether it's bleed, poison, fire, ice, etc. She can basically absorb those essences, and then after absorbing a certain number and storing them up, can unleash them in a special attack that changes based on what you've absorbed. So
this is definitely, you can see already that it's very, very focused on co-op, right? And we know that. We know that the game has been created based on 3-player co-op. But like, we can have one of your team members who is like all about lightning damage, and they'll be shooting lightning at the boss. And then this other character can be pulling the lightning out of the boss. So there's going to be a lot of that kind of stuff. So team play seems like it's going to be pretty interesting for sure. We'll see how much of a focus it is, because if it's super focused on team play synergy in order to be successful, it might be pretty rough to matchmake it, but maybe not. I mean, I know I've seen some snippets of interviews here and there, and they've said that they don't want to make it easier, which I think we'll see in the IGN article. So it's definitely still going to be a very tough thing.
Storing them up can unleash them in a special attack that changes based on what you've absorbed. So you can see that's like not going to be the easiest character to just immediately take control of and know what you're doing, but I'm sure the payoff will be there once you do. And there are 4 more characters in addition to those 4, including one who's an archer and one built around parrying combat like Sekiro or the Crystal Hard tier from the Shadow of the Erdtree expansion, but FromSoftware are keeping tight-lipped about those heroes for now, and there are 2 more that we don't know anything about. Number 4.
Well, I assume if you're playing like the parry character, you're gonna have to have a skill that like makes the boss attack you. Because if they're attacking your teammates and you're a parry-based character and it's all about your whole thing is parrying, it feels really bad when you're not being attacked.
Fromsoftware are keeping tight-lipped about those heroes for now, and there are 2 more that we don't know anything about. Number 4, NightReign is not a battle royale, but yeah, it kind of looks like one. When I first saw this trailer at Fromsoftware's offices, I thought, what the heck is this, a battle royale? And yeah, NightReign is borrowing the popular battle royale mechanic of a danger zone ring shrinking to a focal point on the map as you play. So at first glance, like, it looks like it's going to be a PvP game. You even drop into the map from the sky on like a spectral raven. So it kind of feels like you're jumping off the Fortnite party bus or, you know, descending onto a map in Apex Legends. The Fortnite vibes are very strong in this game, right? But no, it is not a battle royale game. In fact, it is even less of a PvP game than Elden Ring or Dark Souls. There is no invasion mechanic in NightReign. You cannot fight against other players at all. So the
no PvP at all. This is a roguelike PvE co-op experience. It is only Limgrave, yeah, that we know so far. So far.
Battle Royale ring is just there to to limit the amount of time you can spend leveling up by fighting enemies and push you towards boss fight confrontations at the end of each day. So the days will only last about 10 minutes before you have to do a big boss fight. And then assuming you've survived the first day, the circle will recede, closes back in again on you on the second day. And if you survive day 2, then you go on to fight your ultimate hunt target, the final boss for your run. So this is definitely not Elden Ring 2. I'd say it actually has more of the feel of a very, very ambitious mod for Elden Ring than it does a full-on sequel, because it is not an RPG. Number 5. So
yeah, the mod thing is definitely interesting. And of course, someone from PC Gamer would bring that up because it's got like the randomizer, right? Because you're finding random loot and random upgrades for your character in those 10 minutes that the circle is big before it starts coming down. And then there's just all the bosses in here. I mean, he did bring up Elden Ring bosses, although I think he did mention slightly a Dark Souls 1 boss. But in the trailer, yeah, we've seen Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3 bosses. So I don't know if there's also going to be Sekiro bosses in here. Dear God, demon of hatred. Oh, Lord. Keep him away from me.
Does Elden Ring Night Reign actually play like? Well, in many ways, Night Reign plays exactly like Elden Ring. Weapons and basic enemies have the exact movesets they do in the base game. Controls are essentially the same with just a few additions. All of Elden Ring's battle mechanics are there. Backstabs, guard parries, two-handing weapons, etc., etc., etc. If you've played a Souls game, if you played Elden Ring, it's going to feel super familiar immediately. In other ways, Night Reign feels extremely different from Elden Ring. Movement speed and sprinting are greatly sped up. Even without the spectral steed mount, you're far more mobile in this game. You can mantle up most cliffs and vault up ledges. There is no fall damage, like at all, no fall damage. Because each run of the game has a fairly strict time limit, you're also encouraged to just play at a breakneck pace.
So, yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense, right? Because if the goal is for you to survive for 3 days, if the movement speed was slow and everything was like, I guess, normal speed of Elden Ring, each run would take you like 5 hours. Each run would be so long. It would be so incredibly long. So hearing that like each day where you're preparing for the night, preparing for the boss is like 10 minutes. Yeah, it's gonna have to be fast, because it's got to be faster because it's a roguelike game. It's not, go very slow and be very careful kind of Souls-like game. But you do obviously have the combat of Souls games. It's just going to be faster.
Fairly strict time limit. You're also encouraged to just play at a breakneck pace, running from place to place to get as much loot as you can, kill as many enemies as possible, and level up at sites of grace, which are scattered around the map, so that when you get to a boss fight, which are unsurprisingly big difficulty spikes, you're as strong as you can possibly be. So it feels so different from playing a regular Souls game or even Elden Ring. Enemies quickly become trash mobs, right? So you're just kind of running up to a bunch of enemies and just absolutely tearing through them as you level up very quickly. So that makes the combat feel really different than it does in the Souls games, where every new room you go into for a good chunk of the game is likely to present some new threat that you're not expecting and keep you kind of constantly on your toes. So So I really enjoyed Night Reign and also found it a bit awkward to play because you're definitely losing some of that tension, some of the elegance and like sense of significance from discovery in the original version of Elden Ring and in the Souls games where you're going on this long RPG journey. And it feels weird to see all of these really familiar pieces just kind of thrown in the sandbox together and like turned into new toys to play with. At the same time, it still plays really well, right? Like those fundamentals of Fromsoftware combat that they've been refining across their games, they're still great. And it's hard to argue against how fun it is to just put that whole experience on fast forward and be playing for kind of low stakes compared to a classic Fromsoftware game, right? Like you're not groaning when you die in this game because you've just lost so much progress. It's not that big of a deal. So I found myself immediately wanting to jump into another round at pretty much at the end of every single match, just because I was excited to see what kind of stuff was going to happen in the next run and what kind of random drops I was going to get that would define how I built my character.
This could also get people into other FromSoft games, right? Like he's saying, it's a lot less intense of an experience. If you die, it's not as big of a deal. You get to get used to and experience what the combat feels like. You're also with other people that can revive you if you die. So you could get into it and say, I really like this combat. This combat's feeling pretty good. And you're like, oh, that boss was also really fun. Maybe I will play Elden Ring. Regular Elden Ring. Widening the net. Yeah, a bridge. Absolutely. Yeah, I could totally see that.
So yeah, let's talk about that randomization. Number 6
Here we go.
is the map randomly generated, and how much does it change? The layout of Night Reign's map is static. Kind of.
Layout
it
static.
looks like a jumbled up remix of Limgrave with familiar caves, forts, wizard towers, ruins, jails, all in different places than they were in the original game. And Fromsoftware says that that general topography and the location of structures will stay fixed. Like the map is the map.
The map is the map.
But the developer's also being cagey about the extent to which it can change on different runs. So Fromsoftware told me that sometimes an environmental modifier will appeal on the map. So this could be like a swamp or a lava spewing volcano. I didn't encounter these kind of big random environmental elements, so I can't say how significant they're going to be for the game as a whole.
You know what they might? So I think you could actually probably guess some of this by looking at BRs. So there's probably, well, this is what I'm going to assume they're going to do. Yeah, it's mostly Limgrave. Oh, there's an environmental thing. It's a swamp. The swamp is obviously going to be poison and you're slowed and all this other, but it probably has the best loot in there that you can get for your boss that you're going to fight at the end of the night. I'm going to guess that that's what's going to happen. They're going to spawn these like more tricky areas that are hard to go through, but it's going to have better loot. So you're then making a decision with your group of like, do we want to try and go and tackle this like difficult random area? Or do we just want to go and have like a regular run and not do that?
Mental elements. So I can't say how significant they're going to be for the game as a whole, how much it'll affect the overall layout and feel of the map, how much they'll kind of come to dominate a run, if at all, or how many like varieties of these surprises are going to be in the randomization pool for the final game. In my interview, Fromsoftware also hinted at the fact that the environmental changes like might be tied to the sort of meta stories for the different characters you can play as. So there's a lot we don't know here yet about kind of how all of this stuff is going to play together. The enemies and the boss.
Right. That is something that I heard in passing through when I was just looking through Twitter and stuff. That there's 8 heroes, right? They are going to have their own stories and you are going to be able to kind of learn about them. So that would make sense. I'm playing Angie, and Angie has some gripe with swamps. In order to progress her story, I got to go to the swamp, okay? Cuz Angie hates swamps. We got to go take her to the swamp. Yeah, no, we have an example of that in roguelikes with Hades. Yeah. Hades was a game where you could experience learning about the different characters in Hades and your own character through playing more different runs of the roguelikes, coming into contact with different characters, coming into contact in Elden Ring Night Reign, probably coming into contact with these environmental areas. So it's like, okay, this character is ready to have their story progress. we're going to have the swamp spawn, the volcano spawn, whatever it may be, to progress their story. It's interesting. It's interesting.
A lot we don't know here yet
God
about
damn
kind
it,
of how
Angie.
all of this stuff is going to play together. The enemies and the bosses you encounter at each place of interest, each fort and so on, will vary by session, which is clearly what Fromsoftware is kind of relying on to be the main thing that keeps combat fresh and keeps playing the game multiple times exciting, because they want that to be unpredictable across many runs, even if
Sounds fun.
the overall shape of the map, stays basically the same. I think there's a risk there with this design of the map feeling, I guess, like a bit too much of a drag to explore in a PvE game if it remains static. Even if you encounter a different boss at the ruins you've run around 30 times before, I don't know that that's going to be as exciting as it is playing a PvP battle royale game where, yes, you can get tired of the map, the environment to some extent, but there's just so much more unexpected behavior from other human players. It's so much more dynamic to be in that PvP environment in a place that you know very well than it is in a PvE game where you kind of know how the enemies are going to behave, even if you run into this type of soldier in a fort versus this type of undead, for example. But
I think the thing that would be exciting for me if it's the same map would be there's so many different variations of loot and stuff that you can get in Elden Ring, and we know that they're also taking from Dark Souls, so God knows how many bosses are going to be in the game, and enemies. I assume going to be quite a lot, and I assume there's going to be quite a lot of things that you can pick up. So it's not being created as a game that's supposed to keep your interest forever. Otherwise, they would have made it a live service game. I think they're just like, I think they would be very happy if you played the game for a month, right? Or even the same amount of time that you would play Elden Ring. At least that's how it seems, because it's not going to be a live service. But yeah, there's plenty of people who replay on New Game Plus. Exactly. Like, people play Elden Ring on New Game Plus and they do a different build. Maybe I will go through the entire story of one of the characters, one of the 8, or I feel like I've kind of solved one of the characters and I'm like, okay, now I'm going to focus on this character and getting different outfits for them and leveling them up and whatever it may be. So I think that will probably be fine. And again, it's not live service like a PvP BR. They don't have to keep our interest for years, even months. They don't have to keep our interest for that long. I think they're just trying to do something different with a formula that they've been making for a long time and add a different mode on top of it and let people kind of just play around in a Souls sandbox. And it sounds fun.
But again, I played one day of an early build of this game, which clearly did not have every, random and procedural element all active at once. So it's really not enough to see how everything's going to fit together in the final game. There will definitely be some randomized surprises across the day that I played. Night Reign, for example, Margit, the Fell Omen, was one of the potential Night 2 bosses, but also sometimes invaded our play session unexpectedly in the middle of the day and started just chasing us across the map.
Oh, that's
Number 7,
fun.
The loot
That's fun. I like that. I like that. I like the idea of Margit just showing up. You're like, okay, guys, I'll see you in 10 minutes. I'm going to go over there and get my loot. You go there. We'll meet up in the middle. Okay. And then you're like, guys, Margit's here. Guys, Margit's chasing me. That would be so funny if you do split up to get loot and all of a sudden this like end of the day boss that's supposed to be like this big end of day boss that you tackle together and you're like, guys, Margit's chasing me. Please, I'm gonna go here. Please, let's meet up and kill him. Jesus Christ. It sounds really funny. I like that. That's my favorite thing I've heard so far. Margit randomly showing up and invading is hilarious.
Unexpectedly in the middle of the day and started just chasing us across the map. Number 7, the loot system resembles a lot of other action RPGs. If you've played a Souls game, if you played Elden Ring, you know that these games have literally hundreds of weapons in them. And I only ever used a handful of them in a given playthrough. which was kind of a bummer. But the way NightReign simplifies stats and makes it so that just about every character can use every weapon, so you can assemble a viable build on the fly pretty much every run, and you are not locked into playing in a particular way, even if you choose a character who kind of by default is a bit tankier or a bit faster paced. So regular.
That's actually interesting because it's also another good point of why it could be really interesting is the fun thing with roguelikes as well is creating builds with what you are finding. So Elden Ring would be perfect for that, right? The fact that you can use anything. So you're like, okay, I found this really good spear. I'm going to go all in on doing spear stuff. That could be really cool. That could be cool.
Kind of by default is a bit tankier or a bit faster paced.
Could be cool.
So regular enemies and bosses around the map will drop randomized loot. As in other action RPGs, that loot can include passive skills like stat buffs. It can also include active effects and affinities like poison, bleed, ice, fire attacks, and more.
Oh yeah, so you can also get like, you could get a poison spear to drop and you can go, okay guys, I'm gonna do the poison thing. They're like, all right, I'm not gonna get the poison thing. You go get the fire thing.
Abundant. There are tons of chests and breakable objects in the environment that house weapons and consumable items like oils to coat your sword for extra damage, daggers that you can throw for range damage, etc. So when you kill a boss, you usually get to choose from 3 loot options, with one of those options being like a kind of a permanent or permanent within the run character option rather than a weapon upgrade. So for example, that could be like a 15% bonus to damage reduction for the rest of the run. Regular drops are shared between players. So you could open a chest and then someone could just run up and grab the items right from under your nose. But the more valuable drops from bosses are individualized. Loot.
Okay, so it's a little bit of something. A little bit of something, a little bit of both. When you're running around, and like we said, that made sense too. When you're running around, that loot is shared, but when you defeat a boss, you individually get to pick what buff or weapon upgrade or whatever when you do that. Okay. Come across a cool weapon, then building around it or finding... Yeah, I mean that sounds really fun. The idea of doing a on-the-fly build out of Elden Ring stuff does sound really fun.
Your nose, but the more valuable drops from bosses are individualized. Loot is tiered with color-coded rarity, so if you play Diablo or like any MMO, you'll basically know the gist there. And Elden Ring's old inventory system is gone. It's much simplified in Night Reign. You can only hold 6 weapons, 3 in your right hand and 3 in your left hand, and the passive skills on weapons that you pick up actually remain active as long as they're in your inventory. So that means you could pick up a greatsword that you don't want to use because you're doing kind of like a fast-paced dagger build, but you want to keep it in your inventory anyway because it happens to offer like a nice buff to your poise stat.
Okay, that is where like pretty specific builds can come into play. If you can have 6 weapons on you and you get the buffs from all of them, yeah, you're definitely gonna be creating some more specific builds out of that stuff. Interesting. Because there are a lot of weapons in Elden Ring, and there's a lot of buffs and a lot of stats and a lot of skills and a lot of everything. So putting together 6 weapons that's going to go towards your build, that could be really cool.
So you're sort of creating a build just by picking and choosing which weapons and items you pick up as you go. Number 8, there will be meta progression in the form of character stories and permanent loot from each run. In between runs, you're going to return to an alternate version of Elden Ring's Roundtable Hold, where you can chat with all of the characters except for the one that you're currently embodying, practice using their abilities in a training ground, and make use of some kind of...
There's a training ground? A lot of PvP games don't even have a training ground. Well, starting to not be the case, but there's a training ground. I love that. That's great.
That you're currently embodying, practice using their abilities in a training ground, and make use of some kind of upgrade system that was not accessible in the build that we played.
Upgrade system.
Each character in Night Reign has these relic slots that you can equip random end-of-run rewards to. So these offer some really substantial benefits. They're how you're going to improve your characters long-term. One relic, for example, gave me +2 vigor, made my healing flasks actually heal my allies in addition to myself, which was really, really beneficial. Another marked treasure for me on the map and boosted magic attacks, and enhanced specifically one of the Duchess's character abilities. So there's
that's really interesting. FromSoft may be cooking. FromSoft may be cooking up a little something something. That's really interesting. So if you end up getting a relic, right, that is, for example, the healing one, you could say, okay, I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna pick up all the stuff that's related to like healing and all that stuff, and I'm gonna be the one that's like healing you guys, buffing you guys. I'm assuming that that's gonna be possible because there's a bunch of like buff based magic in Elden Ring. So and then, yeah, character specific ones is also really interesting. And these are ones that you're able to unlock like at the end of a run and keep forever. Because you know how when you play roguelikes, at the end of a run, you will have some way to like permanently unlock a weapon or permanently unlock something. So that's what they're doing for this. Apparently, there's no voice comms or text chat. But I think it says it in the article if he doesn't say it. We're going to take a look at the IGN article after this.
There's going to be a lot of variation between these relics, and it seems like you're probably going to get more relic slots as you play through the game, just based on the UI. That's speculation on my part, but it kind of makes sense because FromSoftware told me there's going to be some degree of narrative progression for the characters as well. So it sounds like moving those through those stories is probably going to give you some sort of progression, not just in how the characters stories play out, but also in what bosses you can fight or how the map changes.
That makes a
all
lot
of this
of sense.
stuff was left pretty unclear. They clearly don't want to kind of spoil everything.
I think that's a good speculation.
But I do get the sense that there's going to be some sort of longer term evolution in the game beyond just having these 3 slots that you can put slightly better items into. Number 9, NightReign really isn't an RPG now. Leveling is way simplified. Just like the combat and the movement now, leveling is really fast in NightReign. You still level up by killing enemies to accrue runes and then spending those runes at a site of grace, just like in Elden Ring, but you accrue them very quickly, and instead of leveling up an individual stat, every chunk of runes you spend will grant you 1 level kind of just overall, and that will boost your stats across the board.
Right.
Stat growth is different for each character. So like the Duchess and the Recluse.
I was going to say, like, that makes sense for balancing the characters, right? Because what's the point in having a tanky character and if you could just play the squishy character and then put everything in vigor? It would like, that would kind of fudge it up. So it makes sense that each of the different 8 characters are specialized in certain stats, and as you level up, you're just like adding to their specialized stats.
Stat growth is different for each character. So like the Duchess and the Recluse are always going to have less health than Guardian, for example.
Yes.
If you're downed by an enemy, your teammates will have a short amount of time to revive you before you die. And then if you do bleed out, you'll still respawn nearby, but you'll lose all the runes you were carrying, like in Elden Ring, and you will de-level by 1 level. That's something a little bit different. But as in Elden Ring, you can still reclaim your runes by returning to the scene of your death, although an enemy may have picked up your runes and will be holding them hostage until you kill them. Your character does not have any kind of meta level, so you're back to level 1 at the start of each run that you go into.
That makes
but there are some meta progression elements like the ones I alluded to before. Number 10. All right, finally, when can you play it? So like Elden Ring and most of the Souls games, FromSoft is planning to hold a free online beta test or network test for players sometime ahead of release.
January 10th,
we don't know when,
we can sign
but
up.
It's obviously going to be next year sometime.
February.
Based on their past games, expect the network test to be held between 3 and 6 months before release. Elden Ring was about 10 weeks ahead of release, while Dark Souls 3 was about 5 months ahead. So there's quite a range there. We'll find out more in 2025.
The good news is, you know what this means? Hopefully. Unless they completely go the other direction. The network test is going to be in February. We don't know when in February. I'm obviously hoping early February. Mid-February is really busy, and end of February, I am not home anymore. I'm gone. I'm out of here. Well, I'm going to be home all the time. That's the problem. But it means that there should be a good amount of time between Monster Hunter Wilds and Elden Ring Night Reign, because I do want to play the game. I want to experience the game. It's one of those things where I think a lot of us who are Souls players were like, huh? Huh? What do you mean? But the more that you learn about it, I'm like, actually, I mean, you're right. The Elden Ring sandbox is really fun. There's a ton of customization options that you could do fun stuff with builds. The bosses are really fun. Like this could be a really fun game. So there's definitely concerns, yeah, about netcode and matchmaking and stuff because historically, FromSoft hasn't done the best at that. But what they're putting down, I am bending down and picking it up. So I'm picking it up.